Hey look, I've got a missive from one of my Discord members, Ashirion. Let's read what it says. Hey Mark, guess who learned how to cast Fireball? Uh-oh. Nice try, Ashirion, but I rolled a nat 20 on that reflex save. Today, let's talk about the new book Treasure Vault for Pathfinder 2e on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who did not expect the alchemist to be the one shouting, "Release the Kraken!" Really, that was kind of surprising. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome back to another episode of RPG Reviews, where today I'm going to be taking a look at one of the latest books for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is Treasure Vault. This is a book that's all about expanding options for mundane alchemical and magical items inside of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It has material for players and game masters and covers an impressive variety of types of items that you can use in a game. So today I'm going to talk about this book, its strengths, its weaknesses, and my overall thoughts about this product to help give you an idea of if this is a product that might be right for your gaming table. But before we do all that, please remember the grain of salt that I use with every review that I give, which is, my opinion is just that, an opinion. The best review you will ever get for any product is to try it for yourself. So I always recommend, if you can borrow this book from a friend, or maybe check it out at your fine local gaming store, that first-hand experience is always going to be the best indicator of if a product is right for you. Still, I will do my best to give you my thoughts on this book, its strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully give you some insight into what Paizo has provided. A quick note for today's review. You can probably hear it in my voice right now, but it is pollen season in Kentucky at the moment, which means my throat is really torn up. So this review is probably going to be a little bit shorter than most of the reviews I do, but if there are specific topics that you are interested in me covering more in depth in a later video, let me know and I will be glad to come back and talk about those things in specific. Finally, speaking of things that I treasure, I have a fantastic community here on YouTube, and I love seeing this community grow. So you can help support this community by leaving a like, sharing the video, and of course subscribing to my channel. And you can also check out my free Discord group and my Patreon, both of which are linked in the video description. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get started. So there are two things I want to talk about right at the beginning of this review. One of them is a normal thing in how I do my reviews. If this is the first review video you have seen on this channel, I like to begin at the end. I like to give you my overall thoughts about a product and then work my way through what the product offers to show you how I came to those conclusions. However, the second thing that I want to say is, on a lot of my review videos, I get some pushback from the community, in part because I give two different grades to a product when I am reviewing it. I give it an initial grade and then a final grade, and you can kind of look at those grades as sort of setting an expectation of what I think the product should be, and then asking the question, does the product measure up to that standard? And a large portion of the question for me centers around the idea of the utility of a product. There are a lot of fantastic RPG products out there that are a ton of fun to read, but that don't actually offer a lot at the gaming table, And especially if you are new to the hobby and you are just starting and building your collection, I think that focusing on products that are very utilitarian, that are going to get a lot of use at your gaming table, I think that is the important place to start. And then once you have a solid foundation, you can move on to other more peripheral products that kind of fill out your collection. I bring this up because Treasure Vault is going to be one of those books where I am very conflicted about this product, and I can see a lot of people giving me some pushback in the review I'm going to give today. And let me just say up front that if you disagree with my review, by all means let me know. Part of the joy of doing YouTube videos is the conversation I get with the community, and there may be something that I missed, there may be a perspective that I'm not aware of. I have learned a ton from the feedback I get from my community, so anything that I say today, if you disagree with it, let me know. I love to hear from you and to learn from you. Treasure Vault is a book that I have very conflicted feelings about, in large part because what I wanted and what Paizo was attempting to develop are two different things. Treasure Vault presents itself as an equipment book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And there is a similar product from Pathfinder 1st Edition called Ultimate Equipment. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Ultimate Equipment in Pathfinder 1st Edition is easily an A+ tier product in my mind. When I played Pathfinder 1st Edition, this book is the book that came in second for overall use at my gaming table. The core rulebook was the most used, and then this book actually showed up the second most often. I got a ton of utility from Ultimate Equipment. This book is a compilation of all of the different equipment and items and magical items in Pathfinder 1st Edition that is brought together in one convenient to use text. And it makes it really easy to just kind of search through the breadth of what Pathfinder 1st Edition had to offer in terms of its equipment. Anytime one of my players was doing something with equipment, it was really easy. Hand them this book and let them go to town. And so it stood as a very clear example of an A-tier product in my mind. And Treasure Vault is not Ultimate Equipment. That's kind of the problem I had when I was going through this book and when I was attempting to review this product. In fact, when they first announced Treasure Vault, I knew deep down in my soul that it wasn't going to be what I wanted it to be. Ultimate Equipment in Pathfinder 1e is a compilation of magical equipment. Treasure Vault in Pathfinder 2e is an expansion on equipment. Compilation and expansion are two different types of products, and they occupy a different niche in terms of how a gaming group is going to use them. A compilation is essentially a convenient compiling of different things in one spot so that you can easily reference anything that you'd like to know. An expansion is all about new options. And I'll go ahead and say that Treasure Vault, as best I can tell, has very few items that I think actually appeared in other products in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. There's 2 or 3 items that I suspect may have popped up in an adventure path or some side product somewhere before, but the vast majority of what you find in Treasure Vault is brand new to the game. It is an expansion on existing ideas that Paizo has already presented us. And expanding on existing ideas, that is cool, but it's not nearly as utilitarian as what we had with Ultimate Equipment in 1e. Deep down inside my heart, I was wanting something like Ultimate Equipment from 1st Edition, even though I knew that Treasure Vault was not trying to be that. Ultimate Equipment, like I said, is an easy example of an A-tier product for a tabletop RPG. You're going to use it all the time if you're playing that game. Treasure Vault, as an expansion on a subsection of the rules, is more of a C-tier product. It's something that's going to be interesting at certain moments, at certain times, but it's also something that you're probably going to set aside a lot because you don't need it most of the time. And so assigning an initial grade for Treasure Vault was a little difficult for me because I wanted that A-tier experience that I had from the first edition equivalent, but I kind of knew I needed to set a C-tier initial grade instead. If you are looking at Treasure Vault, I think the most important thing you can keep in mind is this. This is not a compilation, it's an expansion. This is about adding new options to the game in the form of a variety of different equipment and items that players can use. With all of that being said, let's ask the question, what is my final grade for Treasure Vault? Well, at the end of the day, I decided to give Treasure Vault an overall grade of B-. While this is something of a niche product, I will say that Paizo has done a very good job of delivering a very creative book. Treasure Vault is full of a lot of new and very interesting ideas. It offers some nice takes on existing concepts, and as a storyteller, I've had several different ideas just pop up very quickly as I've read through the book, and I think that players and game masters alike are going to see a lot of things in this book that are going to inspire them and make them go, oh, that could be a lot of fun. Another really strong aspect of Treasure Vault is this. It's a book that has something for everybody. If you're playing a fighter, a wizard, a rogue, a cleric, an alchemist, there's stuff in this book for you. It doesn't matter what kind of character you're trying to bring to the table. Treasure Vault is going to have options for you, and the book is very good about having a spread of options from low level 1 equipment all the way up to the most powerful level 20 equipment that you can imagine. No matter who your character is or where they are in their journey, there's probably going to be something inside this book that is going to be interesting to you, and I like that diversity of options that Paizo presents in this book. However, there are a couple of cons that are worth discussing. And one of them is, I don't know how to say this beyond just, a player's going to pick it up twice. Treasure Vault aims to cover a wide variety of different types of equipment. That's one of the strengths of the book. But the trade-off is, when you paint so wide, the actual depth of content can be a little lackluster in places, and I can see a lot of situations where an individual player looks at Treasure Vault and says, oh, this is really cool, and that's really cool, and those are the only two things that I need for my character. I guess I'm done with this. Now, every player at the table, I think, is going to have that experience, but the individual ratio of how much Treasure Vault will be used relative to a single character is somewhat thin. Now, the exception here is Alchemist, and we'll talk about that more here in a moment. I think Alchemists are going to love this book, but just know as a general rule that the breadth of the content does mean that on some occasions the depth of individual pieces of content is not quite what you might want it to be. To give you an example, one of the coolest ideas in Treasure Vault is something called paired weapons, which we will discuss a little more in depth later. Basic concept is you have two weapons that are intended to be used in tandem. One character uses one weapon, another character uses a second weapon, and when these two characters use these weapons at the same time, it unlocks unique abilities or special actions. It's a really cool concept that plays into some of the most entertaining stuff in tabletop RPGs. I love the idea. And there's two pairs. You have one set of two items over here and another set of two items on this side, and that's it. If you want more paired weapons, the storyteller is going to be homebrewing some because you've only got two sets to deal with. It's a cool concept. I love it, but the depth of material offered is kind of shallow. The other thing I want to mention in the cons section is not a con for me personally, but it is something I have seen some people talk about online, and content creators like NoNat have brought this up. In this book, Paizo offers an alternative to the crafting rules in Pathfinder 2e, and some people will still complain that the alternative crafting rules in Treasure Vault are still too slow. Again, just be aware that some people were really looking forward to some alternatives to crafting, and when the alternatives showed up, it wasn't for them. That could be something that could impact your experience with this book. But now let's talk about what the individual chapters offer so you can see how I came to these conclusions. The book itself is divided into an introduction, 6 individual chapters, and then finally a collection of tables that organize the different items in the book by item level. The introduction is 2 pages that introduce a dragon and the kobold that helps to keep track of the dragon's hoard, as characters that are kind of describing the different treasures inside of the treasure vault. This dragon and kobold could be interesting NPCs that a game master could use, but it's the items themselves that we're actually here to discuss, so let's move on to Chapter 1, which is Armor and Armaments. Now, with each of these chapters, I'm going to note the different types of items that are present in the chapter, but I'm not going to talk about a lot of specific examples, just because there's so much here, and I've only got so much voice today. The Armor and Armaments chapter is going to give you new armor property runes, new specific magic armors, new shields, new specific magical shields, new weapons, new weapon property runes, and new specific magical weapons. So a lot of this is the kind of content that you're already probably familiar with, and in this chapter, Paizo does bring back a lot of popular fan-requested items. For example, the Earthbreaker weapon from Pathfinder 1st Edition appears as a new weapon option for Pathfinder 2e in the Treasure Vault. There are some interesting additions to the game. For example, I really enjoy the new deflecting trait that shields can have, which can make them more effective against certain types of weapons. And, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most interesting ideas that Paizo pitches in this chapter is the concept of paired weapons. For example, they have a spear and a mace that are designed to be wielded in tandem by 2 different characters, and if you have 2 different characters who are battling with these weapons, they can activate a special ability that causes lightning to shoot back and forth between them, potentially catching multiple other enemies in the lightning strike. It's a really cool concept. It's very flavorful, and I feel like game masters could have a lot of fun designing new paired weapons. Paizo only gives us 2 sets of these, but they give us 2 really good examples that a game master could turn around and, with a little creative thinking, use to unlock a lot of different ideas and concepts inside of their game. Chapter 2 is a chapter that could be easy to overlook, but may actually be my favorite chapter in the entire book. It is Alchemy Unleashed, which offers an incredible variety of new alchemical stuff. A lot of people have complained that the Alchemist doesn't feel quite as strong as some of the other classes in Pathfinder 2e, and, well, Paizo just gave the Alchemist a lot of new toys, so now's a good time to check the Alchemist back out. You may find that the new options are very engaging. In this particular section, you can expect to find new alchemical ammunition, new bombs, new alchemical foods, new tools, new elixirs, new potions, new permanent alchemical items, that's a new concept, and from a narrative perspective, one of the most interesting items is the new concept of bottled monstrosities. Now, a lot of the ideas that I'm touching on here, these are things we have seen in part in other places before. For example, the idea of alchemical foods was brought up in Lost Omens: The Grand Bazaar. This isn't a completely new concept for Pathfinder 2e, but in this particular chapter, this is one area where I feel like Paizo does a good job of going in depth on the different ideas. Like, there are several pages of new alchemical foods, like the Assassin Vine Wine, that are just really well done and I think offer a really nice take on what you can do inside of Pathfinder 2e. However, narratively, the most interesting thing that Paizo does here is they add the new concept of bottled monstrosities, and it's presented as kind of the dark side of alchemy, where alchemists have preserved a portion of a corpse of a monster and filled it with alchemical fluids that they can use to bring that monster back to life temporarily to accomplish some kind of effect on the battlefield. For example, there is a bottled kraken where you can fling it out on the battlefield and have kraken tentacles springing to life and just causing a lot of chaos. It's both mechanically interesting and very narratively engaging, and Paizo delivers some really consistent quality on the alchemical items in this chapter. So if you've been sleeping on alchemists for a while, check this chapter out. You may like the new toys that Paizo offers. The next chapter is Chapter 3, Momentary Magic, which covers a variety of different consumables or other items that are used up very quickly, and some of the different categories covered in this chapter include catalyst, fulus, magical ammunition, oils, potions, talismans, a new type of item called missives, and wondrous consumables, which is sort of a catch-all for one-use wondrous items. By the way, one of my favorite items in this entire book can be found in Chapter 3 in the Wondrous Consumables section with the new rare item, the Bargainer's Instrument. And when you read this item, if you are not conspicuously humming The Devil Went Down to Georgia by the Charlie Daniels Band while reading it, you're doing it wrong. Seriously, Paizo, whoever came up with the Bargainer's Instrument, that is hilarious. I love it. Probably the most interesting new concept in this chapter, though, is missives, which are basically magical letters. You write a letter, and the letter is so powerful and full of magic that it has an effect when someone reads it. For example, if you really don't like someone, you can write an angry letter that literally blows up in their face. Overall, I feel like Chapter 3 is one of those chapters that's going to get glossed over a little more than the other chapters in Treasure Vault, just because players tend to gloss over consumables. But as I've argued on this channel before, consumables are more important in Pathfinder 2nd Edition than they are in some other TTRPGs, and Paizo's done a good job of continuing to push what consumables can be, what consumables are inside of the game, so don't skip out on this chapter. There are some good ideas. By the way, some of the things I mentioned, like Catalyst and Fulus, if you're wondering what those are expansions on concepts originally introduced in books like Secrets of Magic. The chapter that I imagine will see the most use, however, is Chapter 4, the Trappings of Power, and these are items that are more permanent and more impactful over the long term. This chapter includes new Apex items, new assistive items, grimoires, magical tattoos, spell hearts, new held items, staves, wands, and a collection of worn items. Now again, this is a very broad spectrum of different permanent magical items that characters might use, and it's going to cover equipment for a wide variety of characters, but there are a few standouts in this chapter. My personal favorite thing that they did in this chapter is expand on the idea of Apex items. Apex items are very powerful, but up until this point, they have been very limited inside of Pathfinder 2e. The number of options for Apex items has just been kind of disappointing. This chapter really expands the number of Apex items that characters can choose from, and though you can't really get them till towards the end of a campaign, I'm glad that Paizo is giving us a lot more variety here, because previously there weren't enough choices in this category. Assistive items is one of the things that was added on in Lost Omens: The Grand Bazaar, and covers different kinds of magical equipment that might help characters who have to deal with different types of disabilities. And one of my favorite options here is the magical prosthetic eye. So if you've ever wanted to play Mad-Eyed Moody, now's your chance. They do have a bit of a discussion in this book, just like they did in Grand Bazaar, about the hows and whys of playing characters with disabilities. That's beyond the scope of the conversation in this video, but Paizo does kind of address that concept, and I will say Paizo does a good job of offering some creative ways to incorporate assistive items into the game. So whether you want to incorporate a wand into your cane or ride around on an ooze chair, there's some fun stuff in this section. However, when it comes to brand new concepts in Chapter 4, probably my favorite is Coda Instruments, which is an offshoot of staves. Staves, as a magical item, work really well for wizards and sorcerers and clerics and other caster classes like that. But for bards, though they may be casters, the idea of switching out your instrument for a staff, that's just an action economy tax. Wouldn't it be nice if you could combine the functionality of a musical instrument into the functionality of a staff? That's what you get with Coda Instruments. They are musical instruments that function just like staves, but for the bard class. This is honestly a gap in the equipment I didn't even realize needed to be filled until I saw it, but now that I've seen it, Paizo, thank you. That's just really cool. The next chapter is not about items that your characters can use, but rather about the process of constructing items. Chapter 5 is called The Secrets of Crafting, and as its main feature, offers a set of alternative crafting rules for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, I'm not going to dive into the whole set of rules here. The channel How It's Played did a fantastic video on how the new crafting rules work, and I'll throw a link up here and probably down in the video description as well if you are interested in how Paizo changed up the crafting rules. How It's Played does a fantastic job presenting that, and I strongly encourage checking those out. The quick TLDR version of the alternate rules is crafting is now quicker for items that are lower level or consumable, and crafting now takes longer for higher level items and permanent items. The reception on this change has been mixed at best. One of the big complaints about crafting rules for a long time has been crafting takes so long that it almost feels unusable, and Paizo made the permanent magical items take longer to craft. That's left a lot of people with a bit of a sour taste in their mouth towards this chapter. Now, I have another video where I've talked about the idea of slowing stories down and why that's important, and it kind of comes alongside this discussion of crafting, so I'm not going to dive too deep into the debate here, but just realize that the alternative rules for crafting, if your complaint was the speed of crafting, the alternative rules are not going to fix that. If your complaint was the depth or variety of crafting, you may find the new alternative crafting rules more your speed. In addition to the alternative crafting rules, they also present nature crafting rules and story-based crafting rules that you can look at as well, though those topics are not nearly as central to what this chapter is trying to accomplish. After this, you have Chapter 6, which is the Game Master's Trove, and these are all the tools and toys for Game Masters to have fun with. And if you're a storyteller, I think you're going to have fun with this chapter. This chapter is going to cover artifacts, archetype artifacts, blighted boons, cursed and intelligent items, and new options for relics. Now, artifacts and cursed and intelligent items are going to fit kind of the mold that already exists inside Pathfinder 2e. So these options are going to fit with what you're probably expecting. However, the other three categories here are all very interesting to me. First, I want to say the rules for relics from the Game Mastery Guide are some of my favorite alternate rules in Pathfinder 2e. I'm actually using the relic rules very heavily in my current home game of Pathfinder 2e. So when I saw that Treasure Vault offered expanded rules for relics, I was personally very excited. Now, that's my home game, so that may not apply to your particular game, but that is definitely something I was very excited to see. However, the two new concepts that are found in this section I think are also very interesting. One is archetype artifacts, which are artifacts that allow your character to take a particular archetype, essentially unlocking abilities of the artifact through archetype feats. Now, artifacts have been in tabletop RPGs for a long time, but for a long time, artifacts have been something that you can't really use in a lot of tabletop RPGs because they're just too powerful. I like archetype artifacts because this actually offers a way to introduce artifacts relatively early in a campaign and make them something that players can use, but they have to unlock their powers through the use of archetype feats. I think that's very creative and allows for a lot of narrative flexibility that traditional artifacts don't have. So archetype artifacts is a very cool concept. However, kind of like the paired weapons that I mentioned earlier, Paizo only gives us 2 of these, meaning that if this is a concept you want to use, as a game master, you're probably going to end up in homebrew territory pretty quickly. Still, the concept alone is a very good addition, and I'm glad Paizo offers it. Blighted Boons is another new concept to the game, and this is also a very, just so devious and mean that I love it as a storyteller. Blighted Boons are things that characters can use or do that have a very powerful effect up front, but come with a really terrible long-term consequence, up to and possibly including the inevitable death of the character who uses the Blighted Boon. Your characters are facing a very important battle. They can drink this particular liquid or eat this particular meal and gain incredible powers, but they come with terrible and inevitable fates that the player is going to face even if the battle is won. I think Blighted Boons reflect some very interesting narrative possibilities that a storyteller can drop into a game, and I could see some really tense decisions that players might have to make if they are presented with these Blighted Boons. I think it's a very interesting mechanical and narrative concept, and something I am very, very happy that Paizo included in this chapter. After Chapter 6, you also get a collection of tables, and these tables are going to organize consumable and permanent items by level, allowing you to kind of quickly pick through the different options that are available in Treasure Vault for a character at a given level. This is something you expect, and we see this in every book that has new items that Paizo presents. And that covers the breadth of what Paizo presents inside of Treasure Vault. Now, obviously, there are hundreds of individual examples of all of the different categories I've mentioned, and you could spend a ton of time digging through all of the individual offerings that Paizo presents here. As I've said, this book is very creative and really expands on what you can do with items inside of a TTRPG in a lot of interesting ways. The narrative impact of Treasure Vault, I think, is very strong, and it is a lot of fun. Now, like me, if you were hoping for a compilation-style book, this is a product that I think will disappoint you a little bit, but if you can approach this product with the idea that this is an expansion on what equipment can do inside of the game, if you have that mentality, I think that Treasure Vault actually delivers and goes pretty well above and beyond what the actual target of this book was intended to be, and I do think you'll have a lot of fun with it. But let me turn the conversation over to you. What are your thoughts on Treasure Vault, and do you think that this is an interesting book that Paizo's presented us? Do you like this expansion of what equipment means in Pathfinder 2e, or would you have preferred something more akin to the compilation style of Ultimate Equipment in Pathfinder 1e? Jump down to the comment section and let me know. And let me know about what some of your favorite new types of items or particular new items might be. If there's something that's a real standout for you, feel free to mention it. Don't forget to do all of the other YouTube stuff. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Check out my free Discord and my Patreon. But as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.